we're going to have this presentation be a combination of some PowerPoint slides and then an actual live demo. Everybody gets bored of PowerPoint slides, so I won't go through too many of those. And I'll actually go through those relatively quickly, but like Darcy mentioned, you guys will have access to review this again after this webinar if you have any other questions. So let's dive into it, everybody. All right, so what we're going to talk about is the solution called Sage Intacct Inventory Automation. It's barcoding for Sage Intacct. What it is an actual module. So what that means is this gets added to your subscription. This is something that is sold through Sage, so through your partner, or if you work directly with Sage, that's how you would add this to your subscription. There are multiple components to this. There is a core or a base module or a construction track. There is printing, which is barcode printing. The way it's licensed is by device. There's advanced kit assembly, which deals with bill of materials and standard kits. And then there's a mobile ship component. And what I'm going to do is hit on each one of these here today. And as I mentioned, show you guys a demonstration as well. In general, what this solution is, it's an extension of inventory related transactions that you would ordinarily do manually back in your Intacct system onto mobile devices. And there's an image there in this slide that you can reference that showcases one of the devices that could be used. It's a barcode reader. In general, let's talk about why someone would use a solution like this. Well, to do that, let's touch on what inventory, really controlling inventory deals with. So you have your general management of inventory, and very simply, anybody that touches inventory knows it comes in, it goes out, and then you do stuff with it or manage it. What most people are doing that are handling inventory is they're relying on things like reports and dashboards that are built and alerts and like reorder points, things of that nature back in your Intacct system. But when you're not using a solution like this, you start to question, what about if my data is not accurate? So if I'm having people enter data incorrectly, just by accident, people make mistakes. Maybe the data is out of date. Maybe it takes a while to get that information in there. Or you just have the human error side of things where somebody's grabbing the wrong item to maybe relieve inventory. So these are all reasons that people would want to use a solution like this. So what does this do? This brings in accurate inventory into this. So what you're doing is when you're using a mobile app like we provide, you're capturing that information right at that point of touching and handling inventory. You also have the ability to manage things like lot numbers, serial numbers, expiration dates, bins. So that's information that is typically error prone as far as data is concerned. So you're typically having to write those things down and then hand that back in for data entry, and it just opens up for quite a bit of errors. Now you also get the ability to scan barcodes like we talked about. That just makes it easy to capture this information, point and shoot. Because it's tied directly into the Intacct database and reading information live, you have instant data validation actually. One of the things that our company has done is pioneered the ability for mobile applications to function even in a disconnected environment, yet still give you instant data validation. So you know your information is correct. The automation side of things comes into play because instead of having to duplicate that data entry, again, writing it down and keying it back in, it's all being done right from that mobile application, and it instantly creates that transaction back in Intacct. So this allows you to actually have that real-time information. Without a solution like this, there's no way to actually see your data in real time. Now, people always ask us, so who uses this? What type of verticals or industries use this solution? Really, all verticals, all industries. Anyone that touches inventory or items in any capacity can get a great benefit out of a solution like this. We've highlighted 4 here. I'll start and just kind of go around here. Construction, so if anybody's in the construction vertical and using the construction version, you have your inbound items and specifically job transactions for this. So if you're doing things like issuing items out to the job, with the job number, cost code, cost type, it allows you to capture all that right from the mobile device and record those transactions back in Intacct. You'll notice some of these are common themes throughout multiple verticals here, doing inventory counts, transferring items, and getting items out. In healthcare and medical, some of the things that stand out to us we typically see are companies that are tracking lot numbers. So if you have items, you have to track lot valuations, expiration dates, or even serial tracking for like medical devices. That's important to use a solution like this because again, it's easy to capture that data and you have instant data validation. So for reporting, audit trails, things of that nature, you know you can trust that data. We also have some companies that use our kit assembly. One example, companies putting together things like medical testing kits, things of that nature. Not-for-profit, I don't know if anyone attending here today deals with that or is in that industry, but we have a lot of companies using this solution that are categorized as not-for-profit. You have to capture what items are coming in, be it donations, just materials coming in. Kit assembly, we see that in play here as well, things like counts and transfers, donations, and then general business. This would be companies that typically are doing like the receiving against POs and then shipping against sales orders. This does work with the fulfillment component of Intacct. Again, doing transfers, counts, adjustments, and then the bill of materials or kit assembly comes into play here. So again, we wanted to highlight some of these here, but the bottom line is, again, anybody handling inventory in any capacity can benefit from this. Let's talk from about managing inventory. So the inbound side of things, right? Items have to come in, and there's typically two methods we see people using to handle this: either recording an inventory receipt, which is really just an adjustment, or receiving against a purchase order. At that point, there's some additional considerations that come into play. I've mentioned this earlier, but the lot number, expiration dates, serial tracking, this is the point where that information needs to be captured. This is that entry into your system that needs to be done efficiently but accurately as well. If your items do not have barcodes on there, you need to get them labeled so that you can do things like count them, transfer them, and relieve inventory. So there's a labeling component of this. And you'll see there are some samples of labels here. The labeling component of our solution does allow you to print out QR codes. And even if you already have QR codes on there, our software can go ahead and parse out that data. So if you have multiple components of information in there, it can go ahead and parse those out and populate the data points, such as item numbers, lot numbers are in there, quantities, and so on. It does allow you to leverage existing barcodes. So if you have items coming in that already are barcoded, but maybe it doesn't match your item number, we accommodate that through what we refer to as alias item numbers. It's just simply a cross-reference. If you bring in items that are barcoded from a manufacturer that have ABC on them, let's say, but your item number is 1, 2, 3, we create that cross-reference and allows you to scan those barcodes, and the software instantly knows it's your actual item. And then there's also the put away function here. Anyone in a multi-bin environment, we're using multiple locations within a warehouse code. A lot of times from a process standpoint, you might not know where things are going to be placed out on the shelves at that point of receipt. So we receive into a generic holding or receiving or quarantine bin. And then there's a put away process. And that's where you would be moving things from that holding bin out to their actual location in the warehouse or shop floor. All right, other side of this, inventory out. So this would be, once again, adjustments can come into play here. A lot of times we're dealing with companies that are utilizing order entry, and then they're creating shippers using fulfillment, basically just relieving inventory off of sales orders. And then also, if you're doing anything with assembly, building kits, bill of materials, like I mentioned, you need to relieve inventory of those components from raw materials, and this solution can be used for that as well. On the outbound side, adjustments, we have people utilizing adjustments in multiple manners. Three common ones we see would be if you have inventory issues. This is just relieving inventory that you might not be selling to somebody that you want to go ahead and relieve, or damaged items. You want to get it out of inventory, but again, you're not selling it. And our solution does respect and prompt for dimensions as well. So if you're leveraging dimensions, it would prompt for that as well. And you can have multiple adjustments set up in your system. We have some companies that do the inventory issue, relieving inventory, tie that back to a project, for example, as a dimension. And they also relieve items that are damaged. Well, those are two separate types of adjustments, and it can point back to specific adjustments then back in inventory. And then under the construction module, issuing items out to a specific job. I referenced that quickly when I was talking about the verticals, but that would be getting items out and tying them to a specific job, cost code, and cost type. From an order entry side of things, we see companies utilizing a pick, pack, and ship environment where you want to stage orders during the pick process, then you're going to pack them up and ship them out. We also have companies that utilize a one-step method where it's just a, hey, I have orders, get them out the door and turn them over to an invoice or a shipper. And then with fulfillment, it's going to update the order status back in fulfillment. And last, shipping. There is an actual shipping component of this where you can trigger your shipping labels to print out while you're packing up the boxes right from the mobile device. With shipping, like I mentioned, you complete that shipping right from the device or the scanner there. We set up pre-configured package types, which can include weight, or you could weigh items and weigh boxes and then enter that in. But it does have the ability to capture a tare weight and tie that to a package type. And then if you're leveraging the item weight back in Intacct, it knows to pull that through. It supports multiple carriers. It does leverage a ship engine account. That's a separate piece you would need, but that's what ties you back to each one of the carriers. And as I mentioned, ultimately, you're printing out shipping labels without having to go back to a PC. Now, inventory transactions. There are three main that we see here. You're counting items, you're transferring items, or you're building kits. Inventory counts, a lot of companies do like a year-end inventory. They might do cycle counts. And what happens is you're maintaining the count details back in your Intacct system. So if you're not familiar with this, you create a cycle count back in your Intacct system. The mobile device allows you to then perform that count. So it's going to reference the count on the mobile device based on what items and information is in that count. again, leveraging what's in Intacct. And then it'll push that back over. So you're capturing all that information from scanning barcodes, tap a button, boom, it's back there for then you get a chance to evaluate your variances. It's not going to update inventory until you close out the count. From a transfer standpoint, we have two methods we typically see from a warehouse perspective. It's either warehouse to warehouse, and that is an immediate transfer. I'm just taking things out of a warehouse code, need to move it over to another one. From a bin perspective, you might just move things around. I referenced that back with the put away, but also sometimes you're going to move things from an overstock location into a stocking location, and then you'd be required to do that bin transfer. And the mobile solution does allow you to leverage the in-transit warehouse transfers. So you can do things, as an example here, creating a draft back in Intacct. You can then perform a transfer out. It's going to validate the right items and quantities are actually being moved out of that main warehouse, updating that status to being in transit, and then ultimately transfer it back in. So it allows you to see the status of the transfer as it's actually happening, and also making sure the correct items are being transferred out and ultimately back in. Now, we're about to get through the demo here, but I want to touch on bill of materials and kit assembly. So there's two methods of building kits or doing bill of materials from the mobile side of things. You'll see we have a backflush method and a component method here. Both ultimately end in the same result. You're building a kit. It's getting components out of inventory and placing finished kits or finished items into inventory. The backflush is pretty simple. It's going to prompt you what bill of material or kit, how many, and then everything's getting removed from inventory and finished goods placed into inventory. The component version allows a little more control. If inventory accuracy is really what you're going for, it'll make you indicate each one of the components and appropriate quantities based on how many you said you're making. So it'd say, all right, how many or what kit or bill of material are you actually assembling, how many, and it's going to take you through each one of the components. Some key factors there are if your raw materials or your components are lot or serial tracked, you're going to want to, and you're going to have to indicate that from the mobile device which ones you're actually using. Again, making sure you don't miss anything from skipping a component altogether or maybe not getting enough of that component. So you allow a complete pick of the components. We also have two versions here. You can utilize standard kits back in Intacct. Leverages barcode scanning. Again, you have it supports lot serial expiration dates. You have both methods we just talked about are available, either the backflush or the components. Does respect bin locations, and there is label printing. So that's another key point here. If I'm assembling kits, they may not have a barcode for that finished kit, so I can print that out right from the mobile device. The bill of materials version actually, I mentioned at the very beginning, we're expanding inventory related transactions that you do within Intacct onto the mobile device. This is a little asterisk where we actually enhance the functionality here. So there's a management portal that is the brains behind the mobile app, okay? But what it allows us to do is we can build a bill of materials in there that allows you to do things like partial completions. You can actually have substitute items in here. It respects dimensions, and you can even have items set up with multiple warehouses. So you can track your components in one warehouse, and you can have your finished goods in another warehouse. Maybe they're not physically separate warehouses, but it gives you that visibility back in your Intacct system. So it takes what standard kits do and expands it for some additional functionality there. Now, a quick summary here with a nice little graphic, right? So what we're talking about with inventory management is items coming in, items going out, and then all that stuff that I mentioned there from counts, transfers, adjustments, and assembly. A couple of things I want to highlight. The big thing here and in the title of the webinar, scanning barcodes, okay? So scanning barcodes is an extremely efficient way to capture data. And it allows us to leverage that instant tie back to inventory and Intacct, so you have real-time data that you're able to see. I mentioned this before, but I'll hit on it again here because it is so important. We have our software so that you can work in a disconnected environment. So if you're in the shop floor or warehouse and you happen to lose connectivity, it works in offline mode, and the user doesn't know that. They still get data lookups, instant data validation, so it makes it truly mobile. The solution does support dimensions, lot, serial expiration date, and bins. This is easy to add to your subscription. It's just a module. So again, this isn't anything that has a complex purchasing process or anything. We do help you guys evaluate whether or not this is a good fit for you or not, but you just add this as a module. It's an extremely stable platform. This mobile platform is used by the likes of FedEx, Whirlpool, Penske trucks. So it's been around for several decades. We continue to expand upon it, improve upon it, but it's extremely stable. And you have our team supporting the solution. So it is purchased through, again, either the partner channel or your Intacct rep, but you have our team supporting this, which means you have access to our full support team, and you can leverage our development team too, should you need something tweaked. We do all development in-house, we don't farm things out. So we're able to be extremely agile in that as well, accommodating pretty much any custom modification request. We talked about devices a little bit. Our solution does run on any device that's iOS or Android. So it opens it up to smartphones as well. Typically, people are using the devices like you see on the screen here that have a built-in scanner, kind of a point and shoot. There's a whole humongous list of devices. And a few things are mentioned here on this slide here as far as the type of scanners, whether you're using beams, imagers, long-range scanning or near distance, what type of environment. This is listed out here, but we actually have questionnaires and guides on our website that help walk you through. Our team is available to walk through as well what environment you're going to need to use these in, what device is the best fit from environments down to budget. So there's a long list, pretty much any device works with this, but our team's here to help make sure that you guys have the right devices that's going to fit your needs best. Now, let's get into the demo. Let's actually see this here. So I'm now out of the PowerPoint. And what you're looking at is in the background is my Intacct demo instance. And what I'm moving around right here is what we call the emulation. So you technically, I'm talking about running it on anything, you technically could run this on a PC because that's what I have it on here. But this is the way the app would display no matter what device you have it running on. When you launch it, this is what you're going to see. Now, a couple things to hit on really quickly here. This is a user login. This mobile app does not take up Intacct inventory. I'm sorry, does not take up Intacct licenses, users. So you don't need to add users to your system. This leverages web services. So you don't see who created the transactions, but we have a manner of tracking that as well that I'll show you. And that's why the login is important here. One, traceability. We now can trace who does what, but really more importantly than that, honestly, is we control permissions. So who's allowed to do what within the mobile app. Now you can have as many of these set up as you want. I referenced this earlier, but didn't get into details. The devices are how the solution is licensed. So if you have 20 devices that you need out there, 20 scanners, you would need 20 device licenses, but you could have 40 different people logging into this. You can password protect it so that people can share devices. You don't have to worry about someone logging in with someone else's permissions. And it does support multiple entities. Now, we can do things like tie the entity into the login here. So if you don't want the user selecting which entity they're working in, that can be linked back to that login there. Now, I don't have a password set for mine, so I'm just going to tap on accept. And I'll comment here. When you're on a device, you're typically just going to be tapping on the screen with your fingers. But for demo purposes here, I'm navigating with the mouse. Now I hit accept here, and this is my main menu. This is completely configurable. You can call these transactions whatever you want to call them. You can do things like nest them. So I have inbound. Under that, I have PO receiving. Well, I could have PO receiving right on that main menu there. You can set this up to look however you want. The thing is, each one of these transactions is going to tie back to an actual transaction back in Intacct. So to drive home the point, you're maintaining everything still in Intacct. You're not maintaining two separate databases or anything. And the example I want to show you guys here in the background, here's my purchase orders. I have a PO sitting in here. Let's say that purchase order now, those items have arrived on my receiving dock. Well, to receive that, the user would tap on PO receiving. It's going to ask for the PO number. This is a chance that I could scan a barcode also. So you could either print off a copy of the purchase order and we can place barcodes on there so somebody could have that sitting on the receiving dock, grab it, shoot the barcode. Or a lot of our customers ask their vendors or suppliers to barcode the packing list with the PO number. Again, it's an easy way to shoot a barcode there. Now, if you don't have that, you can hit this lookup. It's going to connect up real time to your Intacct system and display for you all the POs that are available. Just so happens I have one, but if you had a large list here, you could scroll with your finger to find it. You could also search by the vendor name or the PO number, and then highlight it and hit accept. Now, whether I scanned a barcode or hit accept, it's going to connect up and it's going to grab that information from Intacct real time and place it on my device locally. This is where we allow you now to go ahead and function if you're disconnected and still get that instant data validation because it's on the device. Now I have mine set to ask for a warehouse code. That's an option. You don't have to. It can just simply take the warehouse code that's indicated on the purchase order, or once again, that's information that can be tied back to the login. So if I only work in one warehouse code, I don't need to be asked for that. You could have it go ahead and prompt for that, and the user can select a warehouse code here, and they can only select a warehouse code that is set up in Intacct. So you don't have to worry about them grabbing random information. Now, again, you could bypass this. The next part of this would be actually capturing the items here. And you'll see the items that are on the purchase order are displayed for me here. So I can scan barcodes. If I key in or scan something that's not on the purchase order, it's going to instantly tell me, hey, that's just not on the purchase order. So I know I'm receiving in the items that I'm supposed to here. Now, I'm going to grab this first item here. And it's going to now prompt me for quantity. When you're on a device that does not have a physical keyboard, a numeric only keypad pops up here. So it's easy for the user just to start keying in the quantity. Now, when it prompts me for this, it's going to validate that as well. If I accidentally hit an extra 5 here, it's going to yell at me. You have some options here. Mine is set to not allow me to continue, excuse me. So I have to simply say, okay. However, it could just warn me. If you do over receive, you could allow it to go on. If you just warn you, you say, okay. It also could be password protected. So the supervisor would have to key in a passcode to allow you to continue on. The last option would be is we can build in a tolerance. So let's say you're okay receiving, let's say 10% over what's on the purchase order. It would warn the user, but if it fell within that tolerance, they could continue. So I'm going to say, okay, key in the appropriate quantity. Now here's where the labeling comes into play. So here's my virtual label printer here, and I can print out labels then, and those would print out to a network thermal printer. So you do need to be in connection when you're going to print labels there, but this allows you now to barcode your items. Now again, if they already have barcodes on them, we can use those too. But this is, again, if you need to print barcodes, it's right from within that mobile app, easy to use. Now this last item here is lot tracked. I want to show you guys how that behaves. It knows the valuation method of the item. So when I say I'm receiving in 10, it now wants to know the lot number. So I'll key that in, but you could scan that if it's barcoded. You could split that quantity among multiple lots. So let's say if I received in 5 for this lot number, it would keep prompting me for lot numbers until I distributed my entire quantity that I'm receiving in. I'm going to put all 10 there. We can also default in expiration date, or they can use the calendar that pops up. Hit accept. I can print my barcodes if I want to, or I can pass that. Now I'm done. Push this back over. It's going to give me an overview screen here. Any line, if I had skipped a line or didn't receive it in completely, is going to be categorized as unresolved. And when I go to send my data, it would pop up an actionable dialog box here where the user actually has to acknowledge that. So again, if I made a keystroke error and hit 1 instead of 15, it's going to catch me. If I skipped an item, it's going to catch me. Now, if you didn't get those items, however, back ordering is configured back in intact based on the transaction definitions, it's going to go ahead and kick in when you send it over. But again, it would warn the user. Now I send mine over, it's completely received in purchase order, it connects up, I go about my day on the mobile device, and I can go about doing whatever other inventory transactions or other duties outside of this I need to do. Back in the background here, if I do a quick refresh, you'll see in real time here, it's converted that purchase order, and based on my workflow, mine goes from a purchase order to a receiver, it instantly creates the receiver as well. So this is where the real-time side of things comes into play. Now it's all accurate, it's back here in my Sage system, and when I go into details here, you'll see it also puts in that information related to the lot number and expiration date. All right, so getting back onto the mobile device here, I don't want to get into too many details here based on the amount of time we have, but for example, we have outbound, that's shipping. You can have a pick, pack, ship if you wanted to. Here's my assembly, either just standard finished goods or with the components that we talked about. I have inventory transactions where I referenced this in the PowerPoint slide side of this, but you can have inventory issues, damaged items, and scrap items. These could all three be different types of inventory adjustments, and that would write back to wherever it's pointed to in our setup. So again, you can have multiple adjustments here, inventory receipts, here's the put away, and then transfers. This is what I was talking about earlier. Quick transfer would be warehouse code to warehouse code. The transfer out and transfer in is that in transit warehouses that transfers that I was talking about. And then we have inventory counts. We have a few minutes. I want to show you guys this. So back in Intacct here, I do have under inventory, I have a cycle count and I just have a demo count. So if I pull this up, this is where you would go and create your count. I just put 3 items in here so you don't have to watch me do a count of a ton of items here. What I would do is I would go into this on my mobile device, and you could have multiple devices all out there counting at the same time. I grab my demo count. It's going to connect up and grab that information. Here are the items that I need to go ahead and count. Now I'm going to cheat and tap on the screen here, which by the way, we can disable. If you just need somebody to still see this, but you don't want them to select from there, you want to force them to scan barcodes, we can set that up that way. So I'll grab my first item. Let's say I counted 50 of these. Well, I have mine set to drop off as I count so that I don't see what I've already counted. Now, if you did need to see that, we do have the ability to go up here and say show partial, and it'll show what's already been partially counted. Even if I had the hide partial enabled here, I can still get back into an item and count it. So if I find it in a different place and need to count more, I can. But as we go through, we'll count, let's say, 25 of this item. And let's say I come across this item here and they're damaged. I don't know if you can see in the background, for those of you that aren't familiar with this, Intacct has the ability to have an excluded count, and it's categorized as damaged. If you want to capture it on the device, simply just pull up the item. I could have already counted this item and now I found some more. Let's say I found 10 and they are damaged. So I just check that box, hit accept. I'm done with my count, push this over. It's going to connect up. And now back here in Intacct, if I do a refresh, you'll see the quantities I just counted are all populated here. So I mentioned this earlier, this is not updating inventory at any point here. You do have to manually go through the standard processes of Intacct cycle counts to do, again, your variance and double check before you actually post it, but the data capture is done on the mobile device. All right, so now I'm going to switch back over to the PowerPoint here and see if anybody has any questions for the last few minutes here. I will comment if you do want to see this in more detail. Please reach out to us. I'm actually going to put this slide up here. It has our contact information. You can reach out to us, reach out to your partner, your Intacct rep, whomever, and we can get into more detail where we go through more of a needs analysis of what you're looking into and making sure the software can actually do that.